Welcome everyone for viewing this video and being here today for this presentation on college admissions for financial aid for first generation college graduate parents. So a little bit about me. I'm a first generation high school and college graduate. I grew up on public assistance and public housing in East New York, Brooklyn, and I went away to college and graduated debt free. I have over 13 years of experience in college counseling in public charter, private schools, nonprofits, and my own business. I do currently work full time at a private school here in New York City. And the reason why this presentation came together is, as I went on in my career, one of the things I constantly thought about for myself is if I were to have children one day, would I be able to afford, a school like Skillmore, like I went for my child? And, my various experiences over the years, especially in St. Louis, have given me a lot of insight into be able to help families like yours to be able to navigate the college admissions and especially financial aid system. Changes that occurred over the past 2 decades, and I put it in this context because I graduated high school 2 decades ago. Now the Common App is fully online. Back then, I had to mail the Common applications. Thankfully, I had an uncle who worked in the mailroom, and I was able to send all of those applications for free through his job. So I'm very grateful for that. Now, back then, there was around 250 colleges on the Common App, and now there's over 1,150 schools. Currently, about 1 million folks use the Common App, and back then, students were typically applying to 1 or 4 schools in the Common App. These days, it's almost 7. First gen and low income students have been applying at a higher rate over the past 5 years. And that's due to, a lot of changes I'll definitely be talking about later on, especially with the Common App being fully online and making it easily accessible to apply. More students are applying early actions within the past 5 years, and selective colleges have increased the use of early decision and enrolling the majority of the freshman class via early decision. And because of the pandemic, most colleges are test optional, still 6 years after. And that has led to an increase of number of applications at, colleges all over the spectrum. Now, these days, as opposed to 20 years ago, colleges use supplemental essays, and have a heavier focus on demonstrated interests, which is visiting the school, talking to a college rep, seeing them at a college fair, and so many other things. And supplemental essays are typically the usual ones are talk about your favorite activity, why you want to major in what you want to major in, and why this school, why are you interested in this school. And then, of course, we have the Supreme Court case a couple of years ago banning race through consideration in admission. And then one of the things that I've been most excited is the federal loan debt data and salary information by college being publicly available on College Scorecard. And then there has been major changes to the FAFSA, fully online now. Even when I applied 20 years ago, you could still do a paper FAFSA. And now tax info is automatically added to the FAFSA. And this slide too, it links to a lot of different things that, I've cited here. So feel free to click around those when I send out the slide. So what to consider? How much are you willing to pay for school? So it's very important that you have this conversation with your child about how much you can afford, how much you had saved away for them to, prevent a lot of heartbreak that might happen. Some of the things you keep in mind is it's going to be new limit to the Parent Plus loan. So no longer will we be able to borrow up to the cost of attendance as of July of this year. The limits are $20,000 a year with a lifetime borrowing being $65,000 a year. So one of the things you should also take a look at, and this is something that came big out of living in St. Louis, is merit aid. So if your child has a high GPA and high test scores, you might want to look at schools that give a good amount of merit aid. And then Also, too, you still might be surprised with certain schools that give need-based aid if you happen to have run into a lot of difficulties, medical bills or you taking care of the elderly relative or whatnot. So, even though you might think to yourself, I'm not going to do the TSS profile, I'm not going to do the FAFSA because I'm probably not going to get anything, it's still worth a shot because you never know. And these days, as opposed to 20 years ago, we have net price calculators now. So not 100% accurate, but it will at least give you an idea. So what net price calculators are is every school you have the ability to get a look into how much need-based aid you might get, how much merit aid you might get. So it'll ask for your income information. It'll ask for your student GPA and test scores and give you back a sample financial aid package. So you can start planning even before your child officially applies. Outside scholarships, I think every little bit helps. $500,000 scholarship, for example, can maybe help close the gap, but definitely be able to help cover books. So outside scholarship should be something that not be slept on. And of course, saving. So if you're working with, if you have a child that's a lot younger, I definitely encourage you to look into regular savings or 529 or even investment accounts as well to be able to prepare for the costs in the future, especially with the new limits to Parent Plus loan. Who knows if those new limits will end up being reversed in the future? Um, and then the other thing you have to consider is the cost of graduate school. Graduate school can be uber expensive. There's barely any scholarships on that level. I've worked with a handful of people here and there with graduate admissions, and you'll probably even experience it yourself if you happen to have a master's degree, being in six-figure debt. So, one thing you have to keep in mind is if your child is intending on going to graduate school, then you really have to hyper focus on the cost of undergraduate. The other thing for you to take a look at is consideration is the location, where their school is. Think about the political climate of the city, of the state, of the campus itself, the size of the school, the type of school, whether it's public or private, the student body, the racial makeup and the Pell eligible percentage amount of students. And then you have to really think into the future. I think oftentimes we only think about just getting in, but not necessarily thinking about what comes after, right? So I included some resources here, one from the federal government, the Outlook Handbook that will give you a view into job growth in particular industries over time, what salaries are typically like as well in various industries. College Scorecard, again, is my favorite resource that will give you graduation data, student body data, the federal loan data for students and the Parent Plus loan, and then salary data as well. So you can get a view into what the return on investment might be at a particular school. And then the federal government also have a loan simulator as well. So you could be able to see and decide if if your student gets the maximum federal student loan, how long would it take for them to pay it off? Whatever various plans might be available at the time that your student could probably take advantage of in the future. And then cost of living calculator. Of course, oftentimes we shield our children from how much things actually cost, right? How much housing costs, how much food costs, daily expenses in general, monthly expenses in general. Doing a cost of living calculator with them, I think is very key. I do with my students as well, so they can think, all right, this is how much things cost right now. A two-bedroom here in New York City, I'll tell you, in a few years, it'll definitely be a lot more. So with what you're looking at right now, and you're thinking about going to the school, and then this is the median salary from that institution, typically 6 years after graduating college, and let's say you have the maximum for the student loan, 27,000 after 4 years, then are you going to be able to, one, pay your loan, two, pay your rent, and three, be able to pay for the expenses that you need to be able to live day to day? So it's very important that you talk to your children not only about the cost of college in general, but also what it takes to be a living adult, especially living on their own. As cliches may sound, they want your child to be themselves, right? And that shines through in their main essay, supplemental essays, extracurricular activities, what their academic passions are, what teachers say about them, what their counselor says about them, and their recommendation. And one of the things I personally love to do, when in my work, whether in my business or full time role in general, is to be able to help students tell their story. Right now, I think oftentimes students and families want to try to dictate things to what they think a certain college wants. And the last thing you want is to be able to create a picture that isn't necessarily you at all. And, let's say you do get in, but you realize that the school isn't really for you because you created this whole picture that's not you at all. So, that's what I always tell my students, it's best to put yourself forward, your best foot forward, whatever, write about the things you care about, what are you passionate about. I remember one year a student, wrote his main essay about working in a comic book shop, right? I had students that, didn't necessarily, and you don't have to, think of, write about anything traumatic necessarily. It's purely about like what do you care about, what are you passionate about, what makes you tick, why you want to do what you want to do, what do you care about the most, all of those type of things, and just having those shine through those written materials, and hopefully your counselor and your teacher are speaking to those attributes as well. You know, I often tell my students, you control your grades and you control how you present yourself when it comes to this process. And one of my favorite wrestlers who recently retired, one of the things he said recently in one of his last interviews before December was control the controllable. And that really resonated with me, right? So it's really a life lesson at large. I often think about when I'm applying to jobs, submitting my resume, cover letter, how I present myself in interviews. You can only control what you have control of, right? So your child got to think about this process, as all right, I could do well in class. What do I need to do in class? I need to build relationships with my teachers. I need to go to office hours. I need to be able to ask more questions, maybe even create study groups with friends and whatnot. And also, too, take part in extracurricular activities that speak loudly to them, that they things that they care about, not necessarily, oh, I want to develop an app because I think that will look good. Legitimately, why do you want to develop the app? What's the motivation behind that? Is it serving a certain purpose, for yourself or society at large or your community? So, control and controllable is something that, I think is a very key thing to keep in mind. One other thing to, I think might be helpful too is this whole wave of direct admissions. So what direct admissions is typically in Common App has it. There's other entities that have it as well, where they partner with colleges and a student, let's say definitely on Common App, some other websites, a student will enter in the GPA test scores and then be like matched with colleges, and you're kind of getting a automatic acceptance. So with direct admissions, if you're middle income, it might make sense for you to look into those offers because those might be affordable options for you. Other resources that I gathered and shared, over the years and shared in other presentations as well. So when it comes to outside scholarships, you definitely want to think about the brands that you're interested in, that you really love, Coca-Cola, Burger King, whatever it is. Nonprofits, in your community. If you happen to work for a union, your union might have scholarships available for your children. And then the two other links here, Lincoln, one is a larger, kind of like a information, bank where students put in their GPA test scores, amongst other things as well, and kind of are matched with scholarships. And then the other link is a database of a whole bunch of scholarships that can be overwhelming to get through. But this could be a good start in terms of looking for outside scholarships to try to help close the gap a little bit, or at least pay for the expenses, the smaller expenses that typically happen in college. And then the next set of links is the first one has to do with the common data set. So every school, every college fills out this thing called the common data set where they share a whole bunch of information on admissions, financial aid, and what have you. And this website here gathers the merit aid and need-based aid information. So you can look into that database to see which college gives a good amount of merit aid. And then a whole bunch of lists of other, scholarships that are school-based, outside of school-based as well to look into. And then this third link, comes from the Washington Post, where it's a database of colleges that offer full tuition under a certain income. And that's definitely something for you to take a look at as well. And then the last link is helpful advice on early decision, which is an article that came out in the New York Times 2 months ago. And I think it breaks things down, by income bracket, helpful advice. And I think the thing that stands out to most to me in that article is when it comes to early decision, one of the things you have to think about is if merit aid is something that you feel that you really need, then maybe you don't want to apply early decisions to that school. When it comes to a particular school that gives merit aid, ask them, do you happen to give merit aid within the early decision round or not, But, early decision is something that you could back out of if it's not financially feasible for your family. In the totality of my career, I've only had two families back out of it, both middle income families. And the first situation, I looked at the financial aid package and explained to the family how unaffordable it would be, how much it would put them in a hole day to day when it comes to day-to-day expenses and whatnot. And the student ended up going to SUNY, loved it anyway. And speaking of SUNY, there's a lot of great public institutions out there that are very affordable. One other thing that I feel is very slept on is public honors colleges that, can give merit aid, maybe even a full ride, and gives a lot of other perks as well. So I highly suggest also looking into public honor colleges and programs. And then also too, when it comes to early decision, had the family back out. The second time was somewhat recent, and they ended up keeping applications in play. And another liberal arts institution that they ended up going to, their bill was half of the early decision school that they got into. The original deal that they got from the first school just wasn't affordable for them at all. So, oftentimes you got to think very critically and be honest about, how much you can pay for school. Have that conversation with your child. Think ahead of time, whether it's like payment plans, parent plus loan. I would say we try to avoid private loans because those could really be, crippling over time for you and your child. And then the last link is this random free resources that I found that I linked on my website. And again, you'll get these slides so you can click around and check these things out for yourself. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in chat, or you can feel free to email me. That QR code goes to my LinkedIn profile, so feel free to add me on there. I'm constantly, providing commentary on things that I see around the space on there, and sharing resources that I might find as well. But thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate y'all coming on out. And again, if you have any questions that are more, private, feel free to email me, or if you want to connect with me, feel free to email me as well. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for the time, y'all. I hope that take care.